You look at everybody else's pieces that you think are strong and think, oh, but this is what's wrong with that. This is what's wrong with that. This is what's wrong with that. I don't want to be that person. I try not to be that person. I want to big ups everybody in the hobby. I want to elevate hobbyists and painters. I think it's amazing what everybody does. I want to celebrate it.
This snippet of Vince's video right here is one of the main reasons I wanted to get involved in this community. It's important to recognise that in the creative hobbies hierarchy, somewhere deep in the pits is miniature painting. And in those pits, you're probably sat there trying to figure out how the hell non-metallic metals even work. And you're pretty certain at this point it's probably just witchcraft or some shit. I always feel like if you get into a long established hobby or video game and the community is relatively small, it can be kind of difficult to actually make an introduction. A great example of this would be if you're playing a game and you've got a raid team that have got everything on clear. You're going to feel like you're under a lot more pressure compared to those that are already veterans. And for me personally, it's the fact that everybody I know who is interested in this hobby have been doing it for decades. They've worked as professional painters and some even teach miniature painting for a living. It's crazy. So imagine the daunting pressure that builds whenever I consider sending one of my own miniatures to these people. It's impossible to not feel like they're just going to end up taking me around the back of the shed and distracting me with like some brightly coloured Skaven miniatures on the floor or something, and when I'm not looking, a little soft tear might run down their cheek and then they blow my fucking brains out. Sometimes as people, we can find ourselves getting trapped in the anxiety of what could come from criticism, and on occasion it can even spoil what you're trying to do. It can remove any idea that you had before of progression, and it can be a real blow to your confidence. Artistic skill of any kind comes with time, but we're in an age in which perfectionism seems to be the way forward. I believe that there's a barrier which prevents beginners from sharing their work, and I feel like it's sort of an unintentional adoption of a impossibly high metric of success. Let's call it something like Slayer Sword Syndrome. It's crucial to acknowledge the scale of the competitive standard to validate beginners' anxiety. The high watermark is most visible at world-class events where artists are competing fiercely to etch their names into history. The level of competition, of course, demands perfectionism. Painters who reach these peaks, such as Albert Font, a Slayer Sword winner who claimed the best in show at the age of 18, explicitly structures their approach around rigorous self-demands. Analysis of these high-tier artists shows that they operate as perfectionists in the strictest sense of the word, prioritizing quality over anything else. Their focus going far beyond mere technical competence, mastering the foundational elements of colour, light and volumetry, beneath the outwardly recognizable ultra-polished smooth finish. This fundamental discord arises because the digital ecosystem fails to distinguish between the recreational hobbyist and the competitive studio artist. This results in the beginner viewing the philosophy of perfectionism, which, of course, requires a time investment that many simply can't afford. I'm here to try and break that barrier for people. Take this miniature that won Christian Schmidt bronze at Golden Demon. It's grimy, it's horrible, it's all round amazing and my personal favourite from Golden Demon back at Adepticon. I love the little sewer grate and the little scratch marks and how distressed they've made it, and the variant of blues and greens for the oxidization around the gutter bit and the horrible gooey viscera around the bottom. Everything about it just fits perfectly as a solo piece. If I saw that dude from across the gangway, well, it'd be squeaky bum time, wouldn't it? Now for contrast, let's take a look at this Nurgle Mini. This was posted on Cool Mini or Not by Nurgle King. Immediately, you look at it, and you can see what you would deem as issues, but I would actually argue that this is just as good as this. It's crazy, isn't it? One person has probably put hundreds of hours into something, and this guy, has probably put about a day into it. I don't know, maybe more, possibly more, who knows? This obviously isn't a Golden Demon winner, and that's fine. It isn't meant to be. But what this is pure experimentation. This isn't painting for renown, it's not painting to please others, it's painting for the passion of painting. And my dude, you're right, this is one of your nice work. I know you probably sat there like, what a bloody chump this bloke is that's talking, and still not understanding how I can compare the two. So let's talk about what I love about Nurgle King's Mini. look at it. I don't need to say anything, do I? I don't know if it's because of the Nurgle follower in me and the fact that I've just read Lords of Silence. And, I've always loved my extreme genres, especially with horror, and, Grimdark's pretty perfect for that. But for me, personally, this is one of the most Nurgle-esque miniatures I've seen. It almost looks like it's got barnacles on it, like the little dabs of yellows and pinks and reds throughout the miniature, like, fully reminds me of some rather dubious, unfiltered internet access days, I feel like it's one of them, if you know, you know. And if you saw that thing walking towards you, well, your body's about to look like a plate of those jellied shit eels and pies that cockneys eat. Whether or not it was intentional, the, I assume, shoulder pad is reminding me massively of William Birkin after he's infected with the G virus. It's like a giant tumour that's stretching the skin to the point where it's almost tearing. I love the very obvious flash. You can tell that this is some sort of compact camera, but the flash accidentally has given the shoulder a little bit more detail. It kind of looks like the start of an eye. That, or, it also kind of looks a bit like he's smeared tinned minced beef over the shoulder, and the white is just like the fat bits that you get in it. The base is actually very similar to something I attempted recently, in which I just kept mixing colours and letting them settle in pools on a base, just to kind of see what would eventually happen. And this result of this sort of like distinctive Petri dish style of basing that's come out of this kind of works. The whole miniature gives off the vibes of like a partially drank coffee that's been abandoned in a bedroom, whilst the maker of the coffee has gone away on holiday for 2 weeks during a heat wave. Where did they go on holiday? It doesn't matter. But to break the psychological barrier, we need to look at success in an alternative way. Momentum over mastery. The competitive mindset focuses more on singular perfection of each detail, whilst the beginner really must focus on volume, learning and connection. And there's evidence from LVO that kind of demonstrates a recognition of this dual nature of the hobby. I was told about Verco's Vault by a friend, and for those that don't know, it's the world's largest museum of fantasy miniatures, and it's gonna be opening next year. With over 16,000 miniatures ran by a dude called Gary Sparks. Some of the bigger miniature content creators have done interviews with him, so definitely go check that out if you're interested in learning more about him and the museum. But at the LVO, him and his team ran Verco's Vault Masters Championships. You may or may not have seen the small video that I did showcasing what I'm calling cursed miniatures that I found on eBay. The first one was for a Khorne Berserker. I am looking to do a full video with these once I've got enough. I've got quite a few at the moment, but that's not that important right now. The thing that matters about that is that I was already considering doing that video. And in fact, I was thinking about that video when these posts popped up. It was almost like a sign to say, yeah, other people agree with this. And it's nice to know that there are people out there that want to showcase and put things on a big platform, even if they aren't the best of things, because it's the start of something. It's the beginning of somebody's journey. I couldn't imagine being that young and having somebody validate my art. And now that feeling is hopefully going to propel these kids to just move on. They could be the next Slayer Sword winners. Who knows? You can see the vision in both. From the what I can only assume to be bug blood on the Marine's boots to the very red eyes on the little lizard from the painted Rascaltown miniature. These painters aren't going to be thinking about pleasing anybody but themselves with these pieces. And this is why I'm collecting the miniatures I am from eBay, highlighting the beauty of raw experimentation with a lot of these minis that were most likely painted before the individuals even had the internet. The ones I brought, not these ones. Obviously these aren't pre-internet. And if they are, how do you get them 3D printed minis pre-internet? Hey? Come on, spill your little secrets. The great thing to see is that they're learning, and their learning is being rewarded. Don't get me wrong, it's great to also see Youngblood pieces at Golden Demon, but what's the difference between these and the adult categories? Yeah, the quality is, different-ish, but it's still really high quality stuff. And seeing this style going down to younger generations is kind of worrying because it feels a little bit stagnant. I'm not saying it'll always be that way, of course it won't. There'll be a new style of painting that comes along in the next generation, and they're going to blow all of us away when I don't know, the miniatures will, I don't know, what's the future? Come on. Oh, we need something quick. Marketing brain. Uh, uh, Miniatures that smell completely new and immersive. I know some of you out there will probably have a room that already smells like Nurgles living in it, but hey, you gotta stay. It's only canon if your minis also smell like shit. Competitions like this at spaces that celebrate the hobby in all of its forms are fundamental to giving beginners a welcoming space to create, learn, and make a connection, offering hands-on critique and demonstrations without that win or lose pressure of something more akin to Golden Demon. And this kind of event is crucial as it encourages completion and shared practice, which helps pivot people's mindsets around success to be more focused on these elements rather than technical mastery. Every model being finished and shared, regardless of its flaws, increases practical experience, and that invites community affirmation, whilst also fueling you with the momentum needed to keep exploring and learning. And all that's well and good to just say, go out there and post everything and don't care about what people say, but it can get to you. And there will always be people out there that will remind you that bad is bad. There were comments from grown-ass men on Verco's posts berating the miniatures. Fuck that noise. I can continue to say that you definitely should keep posting the things with flaws and that kind of show your vulnerabilities, but you know, it's like exposing yourself to Chester Cheetos in your darkest hours. You don't know what the reaction's gonna be. This is where the learning and the difference between critique and criticism comes into play. There is a fundamental difference between the two, and whilst the terms are often used interchangeably, the psychological and developmental impact is, of course, very different. In layman's terms, a critique is a detailed evaluation, delivered with an honest and objective voice to solely be constructive. It takes structure, it seeks what's working and asks for clarification, and crucially, a critique is specific, providing actionable steps or explaining pitfalls of certain techniques, whereas criticism is subjective, typically negative, and condemnatory. Say pronounce condemnatory. It looks for flaws, finds what is lacking, and is often delivered with vague statements or what can be read as just being sarcastic. Criticism condemns what the speaker does not understand and typically provides zero actionable advice. For a beginner seeking growth, only actionable information matters. If feedback is vague, it serves only to generate anxiety and reinforce self-doubt. If the feedback is specific, it provides an immediate, measurable, and achievable goal. The casual online user will often lapse into non-specific criticism, like finger paints is a huge one. It's something that I'm going to keep bringing up because it's one thing that you always hear with nobody giving explanation. And if the feedback isn't concrete, specific, and actionable, it should be categorized as noise and consciously disregarded. A great way to get an actual critique from individuals is to simply ask. Explain what you've done, explain why you've approached something the way you have, what it is you were trying to experiment with. Does it matter that you haven't done something in a conventional way? No, of course not. Ultimately, if you didn't experiment and if you didn't try and go against the conventional, there won't be progress. New styles wouldn't come about, new genres, you wouldn't see a difference. So with all that, I do hope that this inspires somebody a little bit, or makes you feel a little bit better about your own art and any worries that you've had. As I said, I know people who teach painting for a living and they still don't think they're good enough, which is absolutely crazy. But it shows exactly how difficult it can be for people to fully feel comfortable with their own art. So, get yourself out there, experiment, join local clubs, find local artists, network, teach each other, critique, give yourself new levels and heights to strive for, experiment. If you've never painted before and you love non-metallic metal, then paint it. Try it. Only you bind yourself to your own creative limits. And will these things come out looking like shit? Well, you know what? Yeah, maybe they will. But also be proud of it because it's an attempt. It's a step forward that just wouldn't have been made without that leap.